ready. Okay, thank you. All right, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order a special workshop meeting of the Board of Education being held on May 26th, 6:30 p.m. in the district boardroom. After the pledge, if you don't mind, we're going to take a brief moment of silence to remember Terry Olivo, former district superintendent of Orange Ulster BOCES, who's recently passed away.
The United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody. All right, so I just want to get into a few things here. This is a unique meeting. First of all, thank you to everybody who's here in attendance. It's a good turnout of the board meeting. All right, I wanted to just go over a few things. I wanted to just start initially with our goals. So our goals are to appropriately adjust the budget according to the board and community concerns. With the result of having a budget, we can stand behind with confidence and an intention of having it pass. The budget was prepared over the course of months. We had 6 presentations. We went from the macro down to the micro. We share a lot of concerns that were raised. We thank everyone for bringing them up. And our intention is not to draft an entirely new budget, but to just really focus on some of those items that were flagged that we agree need to be adjusted. So first of all, that is our goal of this evening. Secondly, I just want to tell you a little bit about the format tonight of our meeting. So right now, we're just going to have a brief word of comments. I have a few announcements. If anybody else wants to chime in, they can. Then we're going to start our budget workshop. Our budget workshop is going to consist of an open conversation at this table where we're asking for feedback and to talk about points, about line items that may be disproportionate, and to hear recommendations, make some adjustments, and hopefully also fill in the gaps with information that may not have been recalled or presented in a way that seems very familiar to you, that may have been just in passing day by day as board members. So there will be back and forth conversation. None of those points will be necessarily to defend or support exactly what the end result is going to be. We are going to give the feedback to Mr. Bon Jovi, Dr. Carter, Ms. Lamoureux, for them to make adjustments and then to represent to us with something that we can get behind and adopt. After that portion of the meeting, we will have privilege of the floor. So anyone who has signed up can come to the podium, share their comments in the same fashion like any other meeting with privilege of the floor. If for any reason your questions have been answered and you'd like to, take back on that, no problem. And then we'll close with more comments to then talk about more specifically in that portion, maybe the timeline, and then also the contingency budget. So we just want to get right to work on the stuff that's concerning and dig right into those matters. All right. Okay, before we move on, does anybody have any other just general comments to add before we get going here?
Just one point to something you mentioned in your opening address, that we were looking to revise the budget and make it something we can stand behind, but not kind of detonate it and reconstruct it. And I just want to be transparent, clear, lack of a better term, for everybody who is either here at the meeting or taking part of it. Obviously, we are under a bit of a time crunch at this point. The timeline to get this done is much more rapid than would be a full budget. So I do implore, I know during the last meeting's privilege of floor, I heard some good suggestions that I absolutely think would be valid in a full budget season. I just don't want anybody to get discouraged with maybe something they suggested not being adopted for this condensed timeline versus a full budget preparation season, and I want to encourage people to take part in that and to make suggestions like they did last meeting and not be discouraged if something on the short timeline has been adopted.
Great, thank you, John. And again, anybody, with that, I think we'll go ahead and jump into our workshop here. And I'd like to recommend, when I say team, I'm just gonna refer to you three. So whoever would like to field the question, instead of me pointing it at you directly. I think we need to jump into superintendent budget line item. With that, I think clearly is the elephant in the room, for lack of a better expression. And I think we'd like to just have a little clarity how we landed there, what we're looking at, and kind of work through that and see how we're gonna resolve that.
Sure, so as people saw it in the budget from last year. So the budget of 242 was Dr. Coates' base salary. That was from last year. That was not adjusted going into this year. So that was still in the budget from this year. So moving forward into next year, the board has not hired a superintendent as of yet. So we just needed to kind of have a placeholder for a superintendent's salary to try to include, to be truly as transparent as you can, because 242 is the salary, but understanding with all the benefits, the cost to the district was $323,000. That's how much with benefits a superintendent.
That's for Dr. Coates?
That's for Dr. Coates.
That's what we spent when he was here.
Correct.
All in.
All in 323,000 and change. Yes. So this year, my salary contracted by the board was $260,000. That's with no benefits. I am retired, so there's no health, there's no TRS. You do have to pay FICA. So that came out to $279,890. So it was $43,583 less than last year. So and I'm not defending myself, I'm just giving the realities of a superintendent's salary.
And so I just want to add to that, again, this is open discussion, so if anyone can jump in, right, the Tom and Tom conversation.
Sure.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we did know that going in when we approved, the salary we were recommending, that we were going to see a savings with that from the all-in salary plus benefits and all that stuff.
Right, so budgeted is the 285. That would conservatively probably bring it a little closer to 323, but which what Dr. Coates was, depending on what benefits you have to get. So again, it depends on if the person needs a single plan, a family plan, if they have if there's life insurance, if there's a cell phone stipend. These are all things that are there's the industry standard of what a superintendent makes. So I know and some people brought it up, and I'm glad they did. So there's an average salary for superintendents in New York State, absolutely. But that differs in Orange County than in New York State.
Do you?
I was gonna just bring
You
up.
have an example of what that would be with the benefits if you hired someone next year, approximately what the total dollar you're looking at compared to the numbers you just presented for interim plus the prior.
Sure.
But I think Dr. Carter had prepared some numbers for us, more than Dr.
Yeah, we did, yes. I'm
As
looking
well,
at
about
that.
like what those comparable salaries are just in Orange County alone. Not including the big districts at all.
So there are 5 on the document.
Right.
However, those 5 are base salaries. It does not include anything that Mr. Bonjovi would have just discussed, including benefits, hiring system, and so on.
That was just base salary without any
So
stipends.
I understand how the benefits can be very hard,
Sure.
simple as a school bus full of kids, whatever it is. How is for us who are in the working division, do you explain how the contribution to retirement is different? Because is it by tier, is it like how how does that number variable? Is it based on the amount of time they've worked in education, like, just so us common folk can understand it a little better?
So teachers' retirement system is the one that the superintendent would belong to rather than the employee's retirement system. And that is just based on their salary, and it is a rate set by the state, and it is collected in the following year that they are paid. So we budget for that ahead of time. And the rate is used on an employee that is not retired. So if somebody were to be hired that was not retired previously, then we would have to pay those benefits. A retired or interim superintendent that's previously retired and continuing to work, we would not have to pay.
Understood.
So it's 9%.
Okay.
So you have to pay 9, any district in your state, if the person is not retired, they have to pay 9% of the salary into the retirement system.
Okay, so it's a direct reflection of what the actual salary is.
Yes,
Correct.
So
correct.
outside of health insurance, which is its own,
It is, yes.
it's its own equation to figure out. If we looked at these base salaries for comparable Orange County school districts that I believe Mr. Carter noted, so thank you for that. If we were to add 9%, that would give us a pretty good idea.
That would give you an idea without any
The
other
salary,
benefits.
the cell phone, all of that, so.
Yep.
Just because when you hear a superintendent's salary of 244,000, but the total compensation being 323, I believe,
Yes.
like, my jaw dropped, but everybody else's too, it's, I wanna get an idea of what the all-encompassing number is, or at least get closer to it.
So the TRS rate, just so you know, too, changes each year.
So, what I was seeing from that chart also is the base salaries were ranging in some of those districts between 240 and 270,
Yes.
right? And that's base salaries alone.
I believe the 270 was 23. 2023.
Right, the most recent,
2 years old.
yes, the most recent salaries we can get were from 2023. In general, so BOCES used to collect superintendent salaries years ago. They would have a list of kind of current agreements. But over the years, school districts, for various reasons, don't want to share publicly their superintendent's salary. So BOCES many years ago stopped collecting. They still do other lists of people, but not the superintendent. So that's why it's difficult. So these are 3 years old again, and I don't want to call out any particular district or name of a superintendent, but they do range from about 240 up to 270, and the most recent is 2023, so that's a 3-year-old salary. So even if you tacked on a 3%, that's another 9% of that.
So I just have a question on it. For the 285, so I did my own research today and I put this out pretty late. I'm just trying to figure out where 285 was. It looks like NYSID.gov puts out a rate setting unit, but it's 1 year old and it sets it up. I don't know what a beds region is. Anyone know what a beds region? All right, I'm not in the education field, but it's beds region. So I guess we're in region 3, which is Mid-Hudson.
Yes, we're in the Mid-Hudson region.
Which the superintendent median salary that they give for, this was, again, it's a year old, but we're at 284,987, which is only a little bit shy. Did we use this for a calculation? It hasn't been asked of you, and I know I didn't
We
ask.
did not use this, but I just used it as from my common knowledge of superintendent salaries as a whole.
So and it looks like the upper Hudson, which is not us, which is way upstate, is the lower figure of 233,
Yes,
but the mid-Hudson are, and then
That's
it goes dramatically up, obviously, from North
Correct.
Suffolk.
So this is what I would like to do. Anybody else hop in? I had a lot to say. I wrote a lot of notes. I'd like to see the base salary drop, right? I'd like to see that result happen, and I'll tell you why. Going into this, just to separate the superintendent search and selection from the budget for a moment, I'd love to be in a position where I was at or lower than what we were all in for the prior superintendent. I feel as a board member that would be a responsible decision. If I could be at or lower, I'd be okay with that. Having the base salary lower kind of puts us in that range if we do end up needing to have the extras based on whatever that decision is, that's not gonna all of a sudden put us up there. And hey, let's be honest, even at 285, I'm not defending it, we're saying that's what I want. It's still a negotiable item, right? So if we have someone that we're negotiating with that needs all of the benefits and everything else, for me, the line item wouldn't add up. So I'd like to see it reduced. I'd like to see that line item, money's put somewhere else, right? Another big thing we heard was, student centric focus. I'd love to see how, if there's X dollars removed from there as the base, where that can go to other places. I think that would be important, and I'd feel okay with that.
But if you want to know approximately in the general area of the previous superintendent, then you should just leave it at 242. The base.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I also don't wanna be unrealistic with anything though, like,
So,
I don't wanna say, yeah, 240, and then every other base salary around here is 250, and then who's gonna get a job for less? I don't
agreed, and
know, I don't wanna give that impression.
I don't wanna spend so much time talking about a hypothetical salary proposed, but I guess I have two questions. One, how come, I think it was 242, 244, whatever the previous salary was, how come that was reflected as a budget? Does the budget not change during the year? So like it was 244, we hired an interim at 260, and then when we do comparative math on the new budget, it's not comparing 285 to 260, it's comparing so like, does that number not change? And if, I mean, the suggestion would leave it at 242, but we're paying a superintendent 260, I don't know, like,
Right.
I didn't go to Harvard with that math for me.
You're absolutely right. So what we do is we do budget transfers during the year to cover any codes that do not have enough budgeted in there for them. And when this budget was prepared, that was last spring at the latest in April of 25. And at that point, we did not know Dr. Coates would be leaving, so it was based upon his salary. And since that time, we've hired an interim at a different rate, and not including benefits, it was a big difference, so that is why you see that number there. The other point is that you don't see a change in the benefits piece, actually, you do see a change, a reduction rather than an increase or a change. Does that make sense? Because the salary may have increased in the salary line, in actuality, the health insurance line went down.
I get that,
into your
I'm clear on the superintendent paying part, I guess, like, what my, I was joking, I don't know if you're fully on my motion list of obligation, but what I can't comprehend is, that the budget we're comparing it to for last year is not reflective of what we actually spent.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in how many other instances do we face that?
Right, so I totally get what you're saying, so I guess the question is, when we're looking to do the budget to budget comparison, instead of looking at what the initial budget was for the 25-26 school year, what we would like to see, or what everyone should probably see, is what the actual would be. Now, we understand that that would be a snapshot in time, right, because we're still living in that budget. But what is that snapshot of, if we're making up the date, like March 1st, is like, hey, this is what we're going to be presenting to the board and the public. It becomes a little bit more realistic, because we understand there are budget transfers, some are done internally because policy allows for it, some are done on the Board of Ed, we all know because we approved those on the agenda. So I think for us, I think what John is saying, and it might make sense, I don't wanna speak for everyone here, but it might make sense if we do a real time, hey, what did we actually set it for? And what's that comparison? Because then you wouldn't have some increments, and ultimately it would help you build the budget, because you know that, hey, the last 3 years I've had to transfer X number of dollars into this budget line, we've been underfunding theater for the last 3 years, like, let's make it realistic. Is that what you're trying to say?
I think that was a much smarter way to say it.
No,
I appreciate it.
and sometimes you'll see in the public budget, or not the public budget, but the budget that I shared with you for the April 21st vote date, there are explanations next to different items throughout that budget, because I looked through every code. We went through every code together as a team and made reductions where we felt we could, because historically there were no, they weren't reaching the total expenses in that budget. Then there were other items that we didn't have enough expenditures budgeted for that we had to increase, and you'll see those have large jumps in the percentage increase. There may have been a new position created that we didn't have before, that will certainly show a large increase. So I think that's a great idea when we're comparing the budget to work as a, in a workshop and.
Yeah, I think that helps too a lot with staff, because as student needs change, you know, I feel like another hot button issue has been the aid. Right, we've all heard that in the community, and I think as the year goes on, we do often end up bringing in more aids or different aids or based on the needs of the student. And I think when you compare the old budget, and the old budget is being budgeted for, let's make up big bleed numbers, 10 aids, and we hire 5 during the year, and then when you look at the net on this budget, it's based on 10, not 15. So I think that's important for everybody to see.
And we would see too, if throughout the year, the budget transfers we've had to make between codes, because last year we did have some of those aids were coded to a general ed code rather than the special ed code. So you will see in the beginning of the year when we're starting to make salary payments in September, you have to do budget transfers for that purpose too. But that's not something we've looked at when we're developing the budget with you as a group. So, and then the other thing is that the public budget is what we have to produce in accordance with stated guidelines. And that doesn't have our budget transfers in there or the adjusted budget line in that product.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to go through revisionist history, we've all learned a lot. Sorry. I think we've all learned a lot through this process, but I think that when there's things that clearly don't align with what the budget looks like, we gotta make sure we overflow, because those are the things that, we go to the board of ed training that talk about the commercial supermarket, right? That supermarket has been hot lately. So those are the things that come up, and I feel like we often hear an explanation because, I'm guilty of it too, sit at this table and you're like, well, I know that everybody knows that, I don't think that's the case, so.
Yeah, I think 2 really good points there. I think for future planning, having that budget that reflects maybe that spending as comparative analysis, and also to your point about the stuff that we hear on that day-to-day that's so open, making sure that this does get translated along the way. Some of these things may have been hit in some of the prior presentations, but sometimes we need a little more. You brought up a good point about aids, and I know that it's an item I think we'd like to talk about a little bit about staffing. But before we pivot in that direction, I think that was a good segue. I'd like to go back to salaries for a moment and pose this question. Sometimes we have salaries, maybe more specifically for contracts that haven't been negotiated yet, right? You have maybe one group or another that has a 3-year contract set, and you have contractual obligations you done. What is, and then we have some standalone contracts, right? We have our central administration, we have our non-line contracts that appear as these individual line items. How, and I know the process that you explained to us is similar in nature, that just like we've looked at the superintendent's salary, we've also looked at comparable salaries for the other central office staff. How can we plan in the budget something that may be, more appropriate to, be a placeholder for what that not yet negotiated salary is, as opposed to something that maybe comes across as an 8% increase, where maybe that increase should be 3%. So I'm kind of asking, a roundabout question here, and I want to hear your thoughts.
I'm just looking for a placeholder.
Yes, and I think sometimes what happens is somebody is entitled to other items in their contract, such as longevity bumps, which will show an 8% increase, but in reality, they're getting 2% or 2.9%. So it's, instead it looks like 5 or 6%. But that's because of another item in their contract, or a stipend, so to speak. It's similar to, it's found in all the contracts, not just the admin contracts, but throughout the contracts in the district. So it is, I don't want to say it's misleading, but it can be misleading because they're not seeing base salary only in that line item.
So there's also a stipend that they may be earning for the additional service they're doing, or now they've been with the district 10 years, which then entitles them to
Correct.
X amount more dollars because they've hit a 10-year threshold. The long-
And certain
the longevity.
positions have step increases, which, Doug talked about, just being full disclosure, so there might be only a 2% pay raise, but step is another whatever percent.
So I wouldn't mind
That's what
asking that point in the realm of salaries, just kind of be scanned through one more time, just to make sure we didn't overinflate anything. And, if it is, yes, steps, stipends that are all kind of appropriate to the work that's being done, we can feel confident in that and nothing appears misleading if it's a 7% or an 8% uptick.
I just wanna make a final comment. So the reason why I looked up the NICE numbers, I was trying to think, if I'm someone looking for a job somewhere, right? You usually look at comparables. You wanna see, what the salary range is. So I wanna do that independent, do the salary range for this area, because we're obviously still looking for a superintendent. Listen, the public 285 is high, I agree with that. But my fear is, 244 is lower than anybody here, even pretty much anybody that we see, even at 23 salary rates. So we're still looking for somebody. You don't want the Walmart superintendents either if the market is different. So we have to come in the middle. And I think we're cutting ourselves short. It worries me going to 244. It does. I think there's gotta be a happy median somewhere in the middle there that's gonna be enough that we can attract someone that's suitable. But just to say we're cutting it to zero worries me, to be able to find someone that's suitable. So, but I don't say we go high, we gotta work through
For
this.
any positions, what position is in the district? So, the goal of most school districts is, well, look, I don't wanna be the high, I don't wanna be the low, I wanna be in the middle. That's generally kind of a
I think the other big point is that the budget does not represent necessarily somebody's salary, right? It doesn't represent the contract. It represents exactly that, like what we're budgeting to potentially spend. And I think that maybe there's a misconception, like, approving the budget does not improve space for somebody, especially if they don't have a contract for the position. That's anyone,
That's a great point. I'm sure I can draw up different levels, but we never intended to give 285 upfront anyway. It's just a bucket to use with, make sure we didn't go over.
That being said, that's one of those things that I understand because I sat at this table. If I was reading it online with no guidance.
I'd have the same reaction.
Are
Are you kidding me?
100%. And I'm not gonna lie, I sat at this table and I got online, I kind of had to say, I was like, wait, no, that's not what we said. And then, you guys have done that, and wrote it down, asking questions, but, I just think that overflowing of information is important.
Any more comments on salary items? I think the message might be clear over the.
So, and just one question and forgive me, I was on the tape, so I missed the public portion last time. But, so somebody might have asked this. I know I've been hearing it and I know what occurs, but, I think it might be good to just kind of ask the question of, okay, so say we have one number in there and we bring somebody in less, right? So now there's a delta there. So what occurs to that money that was earmarked for the upcoming school year that is no longer going to be set for, identified for that person?
I think for any person, we're talking about the superintendent, but it could be for other positions. That money is, that's what we're using for transfers. And that is the money we do end up at the end of the year with fund balance, and that's what might end up as fund balance. That's how you build a fund balance. Thank you for bringing that up.
What's our fund balance now?
The current budget or
The current fund balance, we're at the end of the year,
ah,
what's hanging around?
so we're going to be able to appropriate the 3.7 million for next year's budget, plus an additional, was it $900,000? No, 1.2. Oh, sorry. So, in fund balances, we're gonna be appropriating $5,046,501 to support the current budget, the 26-27 budget as we had proposed. Any changes that you make tonight, if we change that total number at the bottom line, will change the amount of fund balance that we use. And we do have 4% as well. We always wanna leave 4% of our budget, and that's the allowable amount by law. And that is for our, what you wanna call our rainy day funds. But we were also looking at hopefully going out and working on a capital project. So we would like to put money into the capital reserve fund to help offset any borrowing costs and whatnot as well. So it would have less of an impact on taxes.
Right, so that 3.75 that you used last year and that we're proposing to use this year, that's fund balance. So that's where that money comes from. It comes from an excess funds from various lines that you didn't spend all that money that goes into fund balance. But then, but we need to maintain, it's just like in our lives, you need to maintain some sort of savings. And it's not for a rainy day. The issue is that we know for the past many years, we have not raised all the money we need from the revenue, state revenue, so we need to put fund balance in. It used to be around 900,000 that we put in over several years ago. Now the 900,000 is up to 3.75 million. And that's not even enough, so we have put that additional 1.2 million in. So it's about 4.9 million really of reserves in fund balance. So you do need to save that money, because we're gonna need it for next year.
Is that money also linked to a roof that we have to do an emergency repair that's, you know, light and that kind of, so we have some sort of, with that, we're gonna go to capital projects?
Right, and
For small
such
projects.
as the asbestos abatement we had to do in our building last summer, we
Here,
used
yeah.
that with fund balance. We also spent additional funds in the controls project for CJ Hooker, in between the amount of time that we had originally budgeted for that. And it was finalized, just like everything else, the costs of everything seemed to be growing exponentially very quickly. So
And
we
with
did
the
have
flood
to
we
tap
had
into-
here,
And the flood as well.
yes, we had that flood, so some of that's, not all of it's covered by insurance, so we do have insurance certainly, and there's money that is going towards the flood.
Great, maybe we can pivot off that topic a little bit here. I'd like to pivot back to what you were saying, John. You know, we had a lot of talk over the past year or so about the number of aides we had working in the building, and we hear 11 people, 20 people, 30 people, I forget the number, but it could seem like a lot. And especially if it's in your building, where you work or your student goes. I'd like to just kind of revisit that for a minute and understand just the timeline of that, because I think it's, I wanna know that we're in line with where we should be, or are we overlooking something, right? We talk about, 20,000 here, 40,000 here. Is that another salary? You know, so if maybe you could give a little bit of a recap of where we were and how we've navigated through there, that would be great.
Dr. Funny, since you were more involved in that topic.
So I know at the very beginning of the.
Which microphone?
Can you bring it closer to please? Thank you.
At the very beginning of the planning phase last school year, we collaborated as an entire administrative team to talk about program, services, equipment, supplies, everything that we pretty much have done this year. And we looked for ways to save money without truly damaging our instructional program or extracurriculars or services provided for children, while also maintaining all those services that were mandated. For example, our one-to-one aids, particular classroom aids for ratio purposes and so on. And so collectively, we came together and decided that, you know, in a very unfortunate budget cycle, our best option at that moment in time to avoid damaging program was to look at our classroom aids and aids that were not mandated by IEP or anything other. So that point in time, as we continued to develop the cycle, we knew that we had 4 aides that were retiring or resigning. So those became immediate attrition. And then we got 23 others. And those 23 others were maintained on a preferred eligibility list for future purposes if necessary. And so that truly is how we arrived at that number regarding our teacher aides throughout the district and making those decisions. And I know that our administrative team is also willing to speak to that if you'd like. I'd like to continue.
Just, has there been any replacement with those?
Sure. Yeah, so throughout the year, we've had other positions popped up by way of IEP needs. We've also had resignations, we've had some movement within. So each time a position became vacant or newly created and available, we immediately went to the preferred eligibility list in order, of course, and reached out to those individuals until that particular position was filled. We follow that sequence each time, which is exactly how we're supposed to follow. We had 18 of the 23 initially approved to be on the substitute teacher aid list. There were those who decided that they did not want to find employment elsewhere. Throughout the course of the school year, and actually, I wouldn't say rather quickly, but probably right around the midpoint of the year, we rehired 15 of those aides, granted not in the identical position, but 15 were rehired. There were 5 that we reached out to that declined offers. We actually had one who became a teacher in another school district. We had others who said that the hours, they were able to find something with more hours. And then we had 3 who actually accepted and then later resigned. And so currently we do not have a PEL list for those aides. Each of those aides have been contacted, offered positions, and we've also, since July 1st, we're supposed to feed into the use of the PEL. We created 4 classroom aide positions and 3 one-to-one aide positions, of course driven by CSE IEP needs. So that is the current status of what we went through by way of that last year.
So you mentioned that we had hired back 15-ish, if I got that right,
15 are still working with us today.
but not necessarily in the same position. Out of that 15, how many actually went back to a classroom aide position?
So I would have to go through and calculate that to give you a 100% accurate, but I know looking at what we rehired, there are actually 2, if not 3, that moved into a position and then out into a clerical position that opened through New York Helps. But when that happened, those positions were also filled with aides. And so, you have internal movement to cover that with existing aides, and then, of course, the 7 total classroom and one-to-one were addition.
So quick math, that's about 60% of these that were left over rehired, is that correct?
It's fair. Yeah.
And were they rehired at approximately the same salary that they were getting in benefits?
Yeah, everything is governed by CSEA contracts. It's negotiated. 5.75 hours, no benefits traditionally. All part of the contract.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I heard you were saying something about sharing some information. Administration wise or?
Dr. Carter mentioned that, yes.
Okay.
If you'd like to hear from the building administration, certainly just about the aides and kind of just.
That answered my question, so.
Okay.
Yes. So I guess the other, again, this is all really quick, right? So we had our meeting Wednesday. Thursday was a working day for the team here, and then today was a working day for the team. So, we're scrambling to talk about stuff. So I guess one of the things that I'd like to see, and again, anybody else chime in, is just, how confident do we feel that in terms of, position wise, where we need to be comparatively, if we feel good about that, I feel okay with that.
I think when we talk about features, the most important thing is to realize that with, you know, the initial 27, there were spots. Where aides were, you know, they were removed from those spots. Some individuals did not regain a classroom aide, for instance. The individuals were rehired throughout the district, but our goal was to maintain those mandated services and to honor every IEP that required aides, whether it be for one-to-one purposes or classroom ratio purposes. And so we are right where we need to be by way of regulation, by way of mandated service. There are still individuals who once upon a time had additional help in the classroom that may not have that. So I'm not trying to paint the picture that every aide that was hired is right back from where they originated. I'm simply saying by way of a preferred eligibility list, that's the process that we initially went through. And the rehiring process is, as it was described, with a few additional positions created and hired as a result of services needed.
So I guess I would just have a follow-up question. From last meeting, I requested just information on, do we have any building leaders that feel that they have a need, or do they feel that they're appropriate with what they have for their classrooms?
Sure. We had spoken today at cabinet, and you know, we talked openly and honestly about where we're at. The most important piece was to acknowledge that we collaborated to make those decisions, that it, you know, it wasn't a one-sided decision on any one side, meaning, you know, from central office or building level. We acknowledge that, you know, the building level could use all of the help that they can get any day of the week, right? Everyone can use additional assistance, but again, we acknowledge that we are in full alignment with IEP needs and mandates, regulations are met, all requirements are met. And so for what we need to ensure, and if we're using rates appropriately, we feel that we're in line. And I believe that if we were to ask our team, you know, they would acknowledge that as well.
And I would acknowledge also that, sure, we would, you know, some people didn't like my wants and needs. I would want more raises, absolutely. We do have to remember that, you know, we're already $6.8 million, you know, kind of infusing into the budget. So for each position that we bring back, that's adding to the shortfall. I'm not having personal, but that's just the reality.
Yeah, and I think just to second what Brett's saying, if we have the confidence and it was a collective working with, you know, the building administration, and we have what we need. Are we hitting that mark? Great. If we had more, I think wonderful. I think if it was collective, that's important. Regarding positions, anybody want to build on that? All right, so we're talking a lot right now about, I think, reasonings why we landed where we landed. But ultimately, I think what we want to get to is making sure we have some type of sense of how we can tweak things within the budget to, you know, make sense. I think we made it pretty clear with the salaries. You know, one of the points that came up, and you know, I think we all kind of agree, it's a small particular point, right? You have $2,000 cut from a theater budget. That stuff has to go back. That's just $2,000. And I know it's only been 2 days working on this so far. Have any of you here seen any other opportunities where we have possibly seen some cuts from any type of student club service where we can kind of roll that back? Were there any other areas that you noticed that we can go ahead and start?
Right, so we made the adjustment already about the $2,000. And there was a discussion about a total stuff. So, you know, it was decided that, you know, the dose would be, that's a teacher on special assignment, on the social studies department, put that person, you know, put that person back in the budget. Seemed like an easy way to save money. But again, that's eliminating a person that has a job as opposed to attrition. So it's very different So attrition again, for everyone, that means someone is retired and not being replaced. And something that has an impact, but if a particular, because we recognize that enrollment's down. You know, that, so attrition is a reality that at some point you might have more teachers than need in a particular department or grade or area. So, you know, we could, you know, I would, you know, ask the board, you know, you might want to maintain the DOSA position. And then that would maintain that social studies teacher. And, you know, there's no guarantees, but you have, you know, there's going to be retirements, you know, in the next few years in various departments anticipated. You might see these savings at that time.
So that would be a recommendation you guys would make me to keep that TOSA position for now, and that way we can maintain that position we currently have
In social studies.
in social studies
Yes.
without removing them. And then that maintains it.
And then there would be no need for any sort of director of technology because TOSA are going to be doing that. By limiting the TOSA, there's a large block of work that gets done by that person. Someone else would have to do it. It can't just be no one is doing this work. So we've had a excellent and lengthy presentation on all the things that the technology department does, and that's, you know, predominantly the TOSA's job, doing a lot of that work. So leave a big hole. So by, you know, maintaining that person, you know, you maintain the social studies teacher, and then the optimum time to make cuts is when there's retirements, not necessarily you're losing a person.
And so then that also,
That savings would be, you know, a little over 100,000.
then that eliminates any
Cost.
need for a technology director position.
Correct.
And then what happens to the services that we wanted to pull back from BOCES that we felt we were, you know,
So I would
Paying
still,
for it.
I would still recommend, so that was about $90,000. You know, I would still recommend that there still is a plan to do that internally, so between, you know, Dr. Carr, the TOSA, and, you know, possibly another teacher assisting, you know, I think that all the communications can get done. Now, what we would need is, we would initially need to have probably the lowest level, I think it's about $5,000, $6,000. We would need Capital Region BOCES to maintain our website, because they host our website. Okay, because that's gonna take time for us to transfer our website over to Parent Square. So Parent Square maintains websites, but it's not like it can be done over, you flick a switch. So, we would need to do about $6,000 to Capital Region BOCES for the maintenance of our, and then of the website, and then it would probably take a few months. But when we were ready, you know, in 2-3 months, then we would get reimbursed, you know, be prorated, the reimbursement of that money that we had spent from the Capital Region BOCES. And in that sense, that we'd be really maintaining through Parent Square and through our own, you know, staff, maintaining the website, the pictures, the stories, the videos.
No. Listen, if it saves money up front, then we can do it through attrition in the future. I'm okay with that. I know that we were looking to save some money in other areas with a bigger picture, but we spoke about part of this, so we have to look down this alley with this good. There's also talks about the cost of technology. This will ultimately reduce it, from what you're saying by transitioning the website over. I think there's a bigger cost of technology, one of that being, listen, we were just hit with a ransomware not that long ago, there's other municipalities that have, so we can't really loosen too much up, at least my opinion on that, to have a secure district, but I think those suggestions are good.
thoughts from the rest of the board on that issue? Take a look.
I support what Mr. Bongiovi was suggesting.
and I think that, I'm just gonna go back to that question again. I wanna save that $90,000 we're paying BOCES, and if that means that somewhere in the budget line item, it means that there's now some type of stipend because the work wasn't covered 100%. If we can cover it and distribute it, great. And we can build it into the workflow of 1 or 2 persons or 3 and not have any extra stipends, wonderful. But people are doing the extra work, and there's a couple of thousand in stipends, I don't mind seeing that when we save 90,000. We're controlling it. So then I would just continue to ask, as you're processing that information, if we do have budgetary line items where we're saving, where can we dump that money back into a student-driven focus, right? So we've only talked about one specific item here, but there might be other areas where we can make sure we're, feeding back into that as well.
So, and maybe, we can think about that, and we can get back to him for a sec, because I do have a question about legal. And it shows that we're looking to double from last year to this year. But I know last year we had a lot of things going on, and our legal fees were astronomical, so I understand why it's high, so I don't understand the increase from this year to next year, unless that's a matter of, well, it wouldn't be a transfer between them, we wouldn't need it this year, we didn't hit that high. So I don't know, I'm looking at you, but it could be for anybody, I'm not sure why.
It's because of the capital project, we would need to have bond counsel in the line for that, for the borrowing. So I increased the line for that purpose, as well as an increase in the legal line just for the rate increase potential. So it's a placeholder number.
I think we've seen a dramatic drop in legal fees just because of less things going on, but also I'm not gonna make it sound that, a knowledgeable superintendent knows the law also, so we don't necessarily have to be calling the lawyers all the time. People can call me and I say yes, no, call the lawyer from that, on that one. So, I try to put a control on it, so I'm not just calling the lawyer every moment. The second they pick up the phone, the clock's on, even if you talk about the Mets or Yankees, they're charged. So I try to avoid that and control that.
Are we able to, I know that, I think it was the last board meeting, maybe the meeting before that, we talked about looking to reduce our hours due to that, and this may have been too close to the budget season to really take effect, but now we have a couple extra weeks, are we able to take a pencil to that
Sure, we
and
can.
get a better item of where we were?
The other reason why I still put another increase in is because we're still using our old law firm for our tax. Sort of some of those, the older ones are done through our older law firm. So we also received an invoice from them. They're unfortunately a little slow to bill us. So we got hit with a bill for about 6 months when there was building message.
But overall, yes, our legal are way down.
I was gonna actually say what Brett brought up was, let's just look at that a little bit deeper, because I know we were keeping that just in case, but in that realm, we're in a much better position than we were a year ago, or 2 years ago, so that's a good place to be.
Would we be able to get maybe a detail on, and not something right now, just to be clear, this is like our, our wants, on the, how many budget lines were inflated due to the capital project? Because I understand, I think we all support the capital project is ultimately needed. But in a year where we're potentially facing a contingency budget, maybe this isn't the year to have it in there, I would love to know how many line items are inflated due to the flow of that capital project, and, is that a situation that maybe we're able to, some point in one, do something that's very absurd, like we say tax certiorari, but we've had some, I feel like successful cases recently where, we had certainly more money allocated than we needed. So maybe that's it, maybe those funds we can repurpose towards the capital and maybe present it as a more tolerable number next year.
And just for the public, the capital project is not just us trying to spend money, right? We have buildings that still need roofs, that still have leaks, you know, the more that you don't fix that, the worse the buildings get, worse things happen, so instead of chasing little things, at some point, you have to try to make a hard decision and make some major repairs. One of the things we talked about was, which is big in the public, is the tennis courts at the middle school, right? A lot of public used it, it's been in horrible condition, was maybe taking a look to fix that, so it's gonna be some major issues that, yeah, it's tough, everyone, you know, we're taxpayers too, but we gotta try to, you know, keep our buildings in shape. And then we also have this building that we're looking at, that we're maintaining a large building that, do we need it? So we were trying to long game save the district money, but then also save up money through repairs and through fixing, so just, and what this hasn't listened to it, just so you're aware, we're not just throwing stuff out just to feel like let's just spend money for no reason. We're trying to be stewards of all the buildings in the district at the same time.
And I'm glad you brought up some of those specific points a little bit more, because those are the types of items where they're talked about just little by little at the board meetings, because it's building towards a plan. There's no definite plan laid out there yet. There's the age-old problem of, I can't hang anything in the classroom, why? Because there's asbestos in the wall. And it's safe, it's been reviewed by the professionals, it was, you know, put into the 5-year improvement plan by the architects, you know, all third parties looked at it, were good, but hands are tied, you can't do anything, right? That's an age-old problem, and at one point in time, you have to say, you have to do something, right? Ground's falling out of the stairs, you gotta fix the ground. So, those are good points, but I agree with you. I think now is not the time to have any more, you know, hopeful budget items, and you know what, as that plan comes to more fruition, I think, you know, we heard a lot of folks get behind the idea of having a new school bus. A lot of folks are behind the idea of, let's fix the tennis court at the high school before it goes, you know, all the way out and it costs twice as much. I think people get behind stuff like that when they see the due diligence that was put into it to ensure it wasn't done haphazardly, it was negotiated, it was a good cost, it was rightful. And then I think folks get behind that.
I think just echo your point, that I think that's what's needed, right? We're gonna go out for capital projects, that's part of this process, but if when we're presenting the budget, we present what is represented in relation to that capital project, I think it's helpful. Just think that sometimes, you know, that spreadsheet has a lot of lines on it, right? It's easy to say this number's way up, this number's way down, but like legal, for instance, I know a huge part of that was for the capital project, and it just, I think it skews the public's opinion of what we're doing.
So off the top of your head, is there another line item that might come to mind where there might be some more area where we could put down a little bit?
Yes, the budget vote costs under the 1060 codes for the annual meeting, those were doubled because of the cost for a vote. We would have to have another vote for the capital project. So all of those costs were budgeted for. We also have a financial advisor that helps us plan this capital project and make sure that we're doing what we can to maximize our cost allowances in the buildings. So that line item also was increased by the amount that they told me that it would be. The numbers that I have from EBD.
But those would be the only type of line connected to the capital project.
Alright. Good to know, I know everybody's been taking notes here, sitting around this table. Any other direction where anybody would like to hop next that we haven't necessarily got into conversation?
So it's just something that I think was brought up and I saw, and not that it's a large amount of money, but I'll bring it up, is because we did it as a cost savings, is the live stream of YouTube. There was a cost savings of doing that. Not only the technical and a person having to do it, but there was another one, we were, just to be honest, we were having some issues at some of the meetings with people breaking policy, saying things they wouldn't, we had to shut down meetings, shut down the video, do things, and that costs legal, right? We have to make sure that we don't get the district sued. So it became an issue. I'm not gonna point it out, but the reality is it became an issue. I'm had to speak up and anyone that comes to these meetings.
I just want to chime in, I want to chime in and say, thank you to everybody who has spoken in the past year, because that hasn't happened. Thank you. The last meeting, there was a lot of folks talking privilege of the floor. Thank you for the respectful concerns to just following those policies, because yeah, you have to spend legal money on that. It's absurd, so stop live streaming. If there's an issue, you can avoid it, so.
That's
I'm
pretty
glad
much
you-
it. That was just wanted to bring up why we just spoke about legal and it was fresh, that yes, it was costing us legal hours, right, billable hours. And so that was an additional cost that it's just the actual man hours and the equipment to do it.
And just to clarify, the meetings are recorded, you can watch any time, correct?
Very true.
Correct, yeah, they're recorded and they're posted, so there's about a, it ranges, but, around a $3,000 to $4,000 savings, not live streaming. By recording it and then posting it.
And what's the turnaround time for it to be posted once it's recorded?
It's usually 2 days, yeah.
Mr. Rediger, would you just give me that number, please?
It's as soon as I get the green light or anybody else gets the green light. I always ask for, are we ready to post it? I'll ask Maureen or somebody else. And so,
But it's pretty quick.
I mean, it could be at 9 o'clock tonight if you want it to be when we're done with the meeting, so. I wait for admin direction.
I'll just make a request tonight of all nights.
Yeah.
Let's expedite the uploading of the video, and not to step over anybody, but let's do that tonight of all nights.
All right.
Great, thank you.
This is like, a sort of matter in the scheme of things, but I know when we were live streaming, did it create latency in the presentations?
No, that's how the room was built.
It seems to be better.
Yeah, it does, well,
Definitely seems to be better.
people had said that it, like, part of the reason that we were always having so many issues was based on the live stream. And I didn't know if that was true or not. I don't think that when Mr. Rediker.
We can discuss if we wanted to re-explore that. I've learned more
Okay, fair enough.
from our vendor.
So I think the additional money is not to the capital project, we should buy a new clicker.
Be my donation. I'll donate the $12. I was just scanning through the notes here, trying to be mindful of the time. I'm sure we can sit here talking forever. A lot of notes I made, I think have been brought up. Any other big points we haven't hit yet?
No, but I do want to go back because I wanted to mention everybody's first. So again, for me, and when we talk about the percentage increase and I voiced my opinion at the beginning. But I think for me, it's a matter of when we get the next budget and it's going to be about what are we giving back to the students, kind of what you're saying. I've talked for the last 5 years on, what athletic programs are we looking to, spearhead that might be, an advantage to us, right? Like what other academic programs, right? So, I know that, again, you had mentioned, the 48 hours of business hours since our last meeting, right? They had it today and Thursday, right? So I know, Ms. Bonjo, we just talked about the TOSA position, but like what other programs or classes that are sustainable, right? Because that has to be a part of it, like what's sustainable. Could we look at it when this budget comes through and we said, hey, all right, we're chipping away. Is it 3%? Is it 2.8%? Like, is it 3% with, hey, we're adding this class? Is it we're adding this program? I think it was, and it could be back in the budget this year. I don't know, and I didn't dig for it. But I know we cut the bowling program at one point, right? I don't have a kid who bowls, right? But I do know that there was a small group of kids that did, right? And those kids had reached out, and it was just kind of like one of those small things where it's, all right, like it might only be a dozen kids, but for those dozen kids, that it matters, right? So for me, and I'm not looking for an answer tonight, right, because we're gonna have to set up another meeting. It's gonna be, hey, what did you do here, and are there any additional programs that we're keeping at this, or we're adding, like, hey, the high school's gonna offer this, right? I don't know, like, obviously, those are conversations you have to have with, amongst yourself, you have to have it with the principal, if you need teachers to teach that. But I just wanna make sure that, where Goshen is moving in a direction of setting us above other districts. Because I do feel like we kind of hit that point, and I'm not seeing a lot of new and growing programs. Some, but I wanna see a little bit more. That's for me. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, and I know kind of went along what you were saying, Tom, where it was like what student center activities, and they don't have to be maybe it's just more activities that are one-offs, right?
So I'm sure we're gonna hear plenty of comments from the public, which I look forward to, but listening to the message we received last time, it wasn't so much the tax levy that defeated the budget, right? I don't think it was, oh my God, I cannot believe that you asked for 3.6%. I think it was the buckets of which the money was in. And if anything, this process of education, but I think everybody in the audience knows, I apologize if I don't know what they did, but like a lot of times we're budgeting money for things that are contingencies, right? It talks about having money in the legal budget for potential capital project. We're talking about having money in the superintendent line for potential hire. I think it's okay. I think everybody speak for all of Goshen, but I will. I think everybody would be okay if we said, hey, we found this $50,000. Let's put this in a bucket for potential programs, right? That we know we can pull from later on, because I know at the building level here all the time, like I would love to do this, but where are you getting money from? And if that money doesn't get used at the end of the year, it goes into a reserve fund, and or maybe it's the balance that we have goes in reserve, and we carry the same budget item, but we have money for growth, for student-centric programs. I think it's okay. I am not a believer, and I think I said this privately to a bunch of guys last meeting, like it's, the budget's like a credit card, you don't have to use the whole limit, right? Like, you have it because you're prepared for the worst. I think it's okay to have some money bucketed though for student-centric things. I think it's okay to say, hey, I have my Christmas money in my top sock drawer, and it's for something that I really want. That's okay, right? Like we're spending plenty of money on roofs and asbestos and legal fees and all the boring things that only the adults in this community care about. There's a lot of stuff that the kids care about that we don't always have funding for. So
we had a student here last week who came and spoke about
first
how
person
important-
turns podium around ever.
first person ever who talked about how
Didn't even know
important
that thing was on wheels.
sports was to him and what that did for him as a student. And to go back to even homework, something as simple as that. Right? If it's sustainable and it was something that was done before because of participation, there is a desire again. Great. Stipend does that look like? And there's one more thing we offer. I think that type of stuff goes a long way. And just to reiterate that again, because I've been saying with every one of these line items, I think when we reconvene, and I think it will be important to talk about the next meeting and the timeline before we have the privilege of the floor here. I think we'd really like to kind of hone in on some of that stuff. What does that look like? What those options might be. And in that, if there were any other line items that were cut, right? Tell me this was cut because the cost is less. No problem. This is less because we didn't need the new equipment this year. We were on an equipment cycle last year. Perfect. That's fine. So yeah.
The other comment along the same lines I know that there was a note on it. At least someone commented about a cut in fine arts or something in the art program. Did we have a comment or that may have been personal, that may have been on the side, but did we have any kind of cut in arts program or fine arts program?
Art supplies.
For supplies
the
itself?
Yeah.
What was that cut?
It was.
Are you thinking of theater?
Was that the only, I thought, I was taking it as
There was
two separate
also-
things, so I'm not.
It was
and
also
I could be,
supplies.
obviously.
I do remember something.
There
with
was
that.
there was a supplies line item cut. And again, that's appropriate because we no longer print, like here in the boardroom, we don't need $3,000 for handouts. Great, I'm okay to just hear that.
There's $1,000 on supply.
Yeah, if that was paper that you print handouts on, no problem. If it was, now we don't supply paint anymore. Yeah, give the $1,000 back.
Yeah,
All day.
I would think it was supplies, it would be a different line item.
Right. No, sure.
Yeah, I just wanna comment on to what John was saying too about being student centered. Something that's come up for us that we've heard is about the enrollment going down, but yet isn't the budget going, like the numbers going down? And I just think, and I've said it before, about student needs don't equate necessarily to what the enrollment is. And just looking at, and thank you for sending us the documents about special education needs, because that has grown substantially. And I think that that's very important for people to know, that just because the enrollment is down, the needs of the students aren't down. And it's important that we always keep that in mind also. I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, but I think those line items alone, no
Mhm.
one ever is gonna say, no, don't give them reading services. No one will ever say that. Those line items are up $1 million. We have needs.
Mhm.
And then your cost of living goes up, cost of materials goes up, right? Even if you just had a cost of living increase in the salary of a little tiny percent, whatever that was, it goes up. It goes up, and nobody wants 60 kids in the classroom. So I think there is a balance in all of it. There certainly is, but yes, magically these things aren't just gonna get cheaper.
So there's one point back in that original point about bucket money. I understand from an administration standpoint that is paying the money. You put that bucket money, everybody laughs for it. So I don't want that to be a literal request, I just more philosophical.
And then just going back to, the bucket of money. It seems like, we all want the budget, we all want as much as we can do for our kids. And from some of the cuts or changes that we're making tonight, some of them may be longstanding, whether it's, the superintendent salary, whether it's from the tacit change. And those might be permanent changes. There's another bucket of money, which we're talking about prolonging or postponing the capital project, which increases legal fees. At some point, those are gonna come back. So that's not an ongoing supply of money that can be used, unfortunately, to fund those things. Because in the following year, we're gonna see huge increases. So we kind of just have to be mindful of that. Maybe on the next presentation, maybe different line items for money that's there going forward and money that we have now for a year, but it's probably gonna need to come back again.
I agree with what you're saying, and I just think that when we talk about capital projects, the more information we get, the better. We haven't, this budget notwithstanding, obviously I think we all feel an agreement with the community at some level over some of the items in it, right? Our community is typically very supportive, right? They've passed the bus referendum. Going back to the capital project involving stadium. Those things historically, the community supports student centric, and I just think that rather than these be line items on a spreadsheet, we just need to do, all of us, myself included, we need to do a better job of explaining what it is and where it's gonna get us. And I just think that I don't think the numbers scare anybody when they're like, what's it?
Yeah, no, I think we brought that up, in that first meeting when the budget didn't pass, was, just really thinking about it, going through 6 budget presentations and looking at the very broad strokes and how things are shaping out. And even through all of this, if you shook out $100,000 and realized that's 0.1% of the budget, 0.1. That one line item means a lot to that one person whose child is in this program or whose teacher used to have an A, but doesn't have an A anymore. That one line item means it all, and I think you're right, in forthcoming budgets, there's gonna be a way that we're gonna learn from this and improve. And I'm glad we did this workshop tonight. I think it's really important. Unless anybody has any other more specific points, I'd like to talk about the timeline a little bit, where we need to go next in terms of scheduling next meetings, what that meeting is going to look like, and then move into privilege of the floor. Sound good? There. Alright, so. We have our timeline here and Mr. Bon Jovi, correct me if I'm wrong, but June 2nd would be the absolute latest.
Yeah, so what I would suggest to the board is that we have another regular board meeting on the first. We need two different meetings to adopt the budget. That would be to have a budget presentation, explaining the changes in the proposed budget. And then that night, if you still want to make some changes, that can be done right there, and then you would adopt that budget. And then the next night, which is next Tuesday, the 2nd, you would have the budget presentation, the public presentation, to hear, public hearing of the budget. And then that would be the whole meeting Tuesday, just be the public hearing.
And
So that would give us the time to get all the legal notices out, because the vote is on the 16th, that's set, we can't change that.
is there any way to do that meeting and public hearing on the same meeting? As opposed to two?
I would think that we want the.
I think you can, yes.
And I don't know if you're asking, but
I just
I have a
asked-
board meeting that night, so I know I can't come Tuesday, so I think that's why you're probably asking. I'm not looking to complicate things, so I wanna make sure that we have enough time. So I don't wanna hold up. Hold everyone up
You
here.
can, I just.
The first I would definitely be rushed.
But yeah, if I'm understanding this correctly, everything would be decided on the first,
Yes.
so. As long as that. If you guys want to ask the presentation. So just so I understand too, and that everybody else understands, on the first, we get the, we see the budget, the revised budget, we maybe make suggestions at that point. The public would see the budget then at that point as well.
Yes.
Okay.
If they're at the meeting or
Yeah, yeah,
watching it when it's shortly posted.
Actually, that would just, that's if it was all in one night, the way I see it working would be, you would have it certainly by the end of this week, so you have time to look over the weekend. That would be posted, and then we do a presentation, you would adopt it, and then I think you probably would need to then formally do another presentation officially of the adoption.
I think that's what we should plan on. I think that we've been very vocal about what we'd like to see changed. Our goals are looking to reallocate funds, not of millions of dollars, and to be honest, all these line items we've talked about collectively, what does it all add up to? I'm feeling confident that maybe we have enough direction that we can get there in one night, and then review it, if we have it, the board by the weekend, and we review it. Any final comments? I think it makes sense. Is everybody in agreement? Monday, the 1st, we adopt it, and then we go into a budget presentation meeting, so we'll do a double header. Great. And then is everybody available?
Yes.
Okay, then we avoid your meeting,
On Monday, we'll do everything on Monday the first.
everything Monday the 1st. That also gives everybody the night free on Tuesday if you don't have a meeting, to make sure you attend the Festival of the Arts over the high school, which is a fantastic event. Don't miss it.
Agreed. I understand.
Arts and music all night long. It's great.
If we decide, I know there's the posting rules and all of that. I'm just worried that if on the first, we get in this room and we don't feel. What happens, right? Like we have to adopt on the first no matter what, and it's be presented on the second.
I think we're gonna know that by Friday when they submit all of the documentation to us, because you don't have anything to do Saturday or Sunday.
Yes, something
And
else.
we process it. I think if we see anything,
Everyone wants to come over
communications
first
with
before
you.
everyone else.
I'll spy you dinner.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out what groceries.
Yeah.
We don't have.
The grocery store is a key reflect to other issues.
In Goshen, other Goshen issues?
right, so clear on our thoughts, quick recap. Salaries, superintendents, some legal fees, investigating the admin salaries, TOSA, all of those items. And then where's that getting filtered to? Where's that money go? Any student service cut, what was put back where we can? If it was cut rightfully, okay, we had the reason, we're good to go. We got real full contract. Okay, great.
And just to clarify, so this is remaining at 3.06. What do you want to lower that, but
I think if we can lower, it, great, I mean, I just,
So,
I wanna operate within reason, like, yeah, I feel like we discussed. I mean, I was writing down some notes, but, you know, I think all of us in our infinite wisdom cut off like a couple $100,000, just passing conversation tonight, but that represents a reduction. But I don't, you know, that being said, that's not the spreadsheet in front of us changing all line items. I think that if we can reduce the number, great.
I think absent, identifying a program that was cut, something that we feel is, you know, should be restored. That we have projected $200,000 extra aid and maybe $300,000 in the tax. I think that's something that we need to look to cut from the budget unless we have an educational services type aid or a need, sorry. I think that's something we should look to take advantage of. To remove.
Also, I know that several people have signed up for going to the floor, and we are elected reflections of the community, but I look forward to hearing from the community too, like, what's more important, the services or the number, because it's not all or nothing, but I think that is an important part of the process. I mean, from everything we've heard, I should say everything, from the majority of what we've heard, it hasn't been 3.06 is ridiculous, it's blasphemy, it's untenable, it's that it's 3.06 and there's so many things that are affecting the lives of the students. So I almost got in trouble last time for going question and answer, and I won't get in trouble this time,
Well,
but
let's not do question and answer directly.
no, I just wanna throw it
I
out
think
there.
if anybody who signed up for privilege of the floor would like to comment on that point,
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I'm gonna say my opinion. I do agree with Brett that if there is a trimming of X dollars and we needed Y to replenish and there's something left over, I don't mind it coming down a little bit.
Maybe it might come down.
I mean, we're all taxpayers too.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember right, from the 3.06 to 2.8 was about 150,000.
Okay.
So depending on where that money falls, how much we shaved off tonight. I would love that as well. Without jeopardizing the services.
Exactly right, exactly right. And I do like the idea of the bucket, right? There's a bucket for the bulk club that doesn't exist anymore. It's just the example. I like that, but that might not be. It's 2.9.
And just make sure we don't leave the tax fund beyond a safety measure. That's agreed. So that,
Agreed,
obviously
yeah.
that's in there just in case some people can appeal their taxes, major corporations can appeal it above, it's kind of beyond us. But if so, we're responsible to reimburse. Small, nothing we can do about it, so if there is a savings there, I think we should, you know, put that towards the budget. Like I said, not reducing the budget.
Great. Anything else? All right, fantastic. So we'll go ahead and move over to the floor. And, you know, just like last time, again, thank you. Anybody who's here or who listened, who spoke last time, it was so appropriate, heartfelt, stuck within the policy. And that really is much appreciated. Just as a reminder, you know, not to speak about individuals, individual students, by name or title, and please try to keep it within 4 minutes. You know, I'm not gonna be running the timer tonight, but please, everyone did a great job of that last time, so let's keep it up. Yeah, we will go ahead and get into the privilege of the floor. All right, first I have Thomas Howe.
Good evening. Just gotta press the microphone button there. There you go.
Good evening. Yeah, it's similar to what you were talking about, but
Me too.
fair enough, it's obscure. I think my concerns have been looking at managing administrative budget. Where I think there are maybe some places where you could question the need for an assistant principal in this budget. For change in the salary of an existing principal this year from 10 months to 12, and for the raise that the superintendent is looking at. There's a fair amount of money in those three things. And they're not involved with students at all, as far as I know. So I think that's what I put down. And, I look forward to that being one of the considerations as you go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I was looking for the non-signed version. We have James Langlois, that's right. Hopefully I pronounced it. Okay.
That's not gonna go.
Somebody else.
We're gonna go to
Give the guy a break.
Joe Connell.
Exactly.
Good evening, President Loftus and members of the board. I appreciate that you did this workshop meeting for all of us and for your continued engagement during this challenging time. Because there was a comment directed towards the audience. John, I'll DoorDash you this weekend, so let me know what groceries you need at your house. Anyone else, feel free to let me know. My name is Joe Connell. I'm a district resident and a parent of 2 children currently attending our beloved Goshen schools. The one thing I wanted to hear a little bit more of today in the conversation, especially hearing some of the other comments of those who thoughtfully commented last week, was just what is the sustainable and agile long-term thinking? I think I may have heard Mr. Whedon mention that there is an update to the state aid allocation. And so I'll definitely want to see that being clear, how that's reflected in the current budget. I didn't get full transparency on that. And I definitely relate to Ms. Johnson's comments about enrollment being projected to decline. So the enrollment decline is 3% from 2,712 students to 2,627 in the proposed budget. Obviously that like numbers can change. I also do recognize working in an education environment that I think a way to think about student needs relates to students going to a gym. So if you have 2,627 students going to the same gym that 2,712 went to, but those smaller number of students go to the gym more frequently, the equipment gets used heavier. And so I often describe when advocating for staff in my role that what we have to think about is how is the equipment used, not just the number of the equipment. I don't think the conversation got to that level. And I really want to budget and to work to think about how is it that we're preparing the students, not just thinking about what is the overall number. And I think that should be reflected in the communication to the community. I do also want the board to consider thinking about what is the long-term personnel plan, especially administratively, right? So if the declines are in the elementary areas, when my kids were in school, there was 1 principal per building. I believe there are now 2 per building. And if the high school is bigger, and the high school numbers are similar, like there should just be a look at kind of like what is the administrator to student ratio, as well as what is the teacher to student ratio. So we shouldn't just be talking about numbers and hypotheticals, but we should be looking at what is the needs of the students and how do they move through buildings. And if we're hiring from an agile perspective, then we're thinking about how can we move as our students move. And then we talked about reserves. I heard some comments from the assistant superintendent that there would be some savings, but the budget put forward to the community in March shows a decline of 15 million to 14 million in the restricted fund balance. So that still shows an overall decline in what the public had the ability to see. So transparency and understanding, if there is some money that's being saved, but our overall restricted fund balance is going down, we have less money in our savings account. And as a community, we want to build our savings account. That's what we as family members each want to do for our kids in the community that we serve. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that I would encourage the board to think about the question of transparency. The public response to the board vote shows there is interest in more transparency based upon every single person who is here today. And so whether that means live broadcasting of meetings, 2 meetings a month, reading resolutions out loud, there is a desire based upon the response of the vote for more transparency. Today, and more meetings is a great step forward, and I do encourage the board overall to consider that. I appreciate all of your time, dedication, your weekend ahead, and good luck with the process. Thank you. I look forward to supporting.
Great, thank you. Right now we have James. Lewis. Not sure if I got that right. Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Quite a long time ago, I was superintendent here, long before most of you were sitting here. I think all of you were sitting here, except for. He's even older than I am.
I had to file a complaint.
But I just had a couple of, one thing, just in my, I don't know, my 20 years or my 40 years of working with school budgets, when a budget is voted down, it's important, and it's kind of what the last guy speaking was saying, it's important to recognize that there are some people that are angry, okay? I don't know why they're angry. I think that some of the comments that I saw kind of focused on the superintendent's salary, but I think that's symbolic. It's like they feel like something's going on and they don't know what's going on and they're angry about it. So communication. Talk about what you're doing. And I think there was a little bit of a discussion toward the end about whether the overall percentage increase is going to go down or not. Always my advice to school districts that I work with is, if you're having a second vote, it should not be on the same budget that you voted, that was voted down. That is basically saying not a very nice thing to the people that voted no. You're saying, you know, the hell with you. We're just going to find more people to vote yes. You might even be able to do that, but you've made some real enemies if you do that. So that's just one thing. I think it's important for that number to change. It doesn't have to change a lot, and it should be explained. And I think that would be a very important message as part of your budget presentation. This is not the same budget that was voted down. These are the kinds of changes that we've made. The discussion tonight reminded me, after 10 years of retirement, that school budgets are very complicated. You know, just listening to you guys talk about all the different little pieces that you might want to be able to move around, maybe reduce that. And I think it's important that the message that's given on Tuesday night in the budget presentation is as simple as possible. Complicated explanations annoy people. Just 2 other things. About a week before the budget vote, and I have no idea what the context of this was, there was a front page thing on the Times Herald Union that said basically Goshen and Newburgh were the 2 districts that didn't meet some kind of federal standard. I have no idea what that was about. But there were only 2 districts in Orange County that were singled out as having a problem. And I think that could have influenced some voters as well. If you're not, so I think if Goshen is doing well academically, you can't just say it, you've got to prove it. You've got to show that it's doing well. And along that line, one more thing, there was a number of discussions tonight. I think Billy, you were saying about if there's a little group of kids that really need something, we've got to put a program in for them. You don't always improve things by adding a program. The quality of what you're doing matters more than the quantity of what you're doing. And I think that I don't know how well you're measuring the quality of what's going on in the district in any area, but that's something that should be primary, and it should be primary in your message to the community. We have high quality programs. I mean, I remember when I was in Goshen, there were things like reading recovery at the elementary level. There was a open enrollment high school US history program that was phenomenal. It allowed, and you didn't have to be at the top level to get into the program. It was very difficult. Science Olympiad used to regularly take on the national fighting at the national level. Those kinds of things are really important, and the community needs to hear about them. I don't see a lot in the Indy, in the Chronicle about the accomplishments of I see the accomplishments of the sports teams. I don't see anything about the academics, and the academics are what matters. That's why you're here. That's why the district exists. Just one last thing, and it just shows how complicated things are. You mentioned cutting the technology coordinator, and that work would be spread out to already existing people. Most of the already existing people that I know have a full-time job, and sometimes more than a full-time job. When you're making that kind of a shift, you got to know what's going on, because I personally, I can't imagine a school district without a technology coordinator at this point in the evolution of technology. But that's a job. It's a full-time job, and if it's not going to have a person doing it, there better be a very clear description of how it's being handled, because I would personally, I would not recommend that, but I know you're in the business of trying to reduce your budget, not increase it. But those are just a few thoughts. I've been out of the business for a decade, so I have no idea most of what's going on, but I wish you well. It's clear to me from listening to the discussion tonight that you're very serious about trying to take this budget situation that you find yourself in seriously, and I wish you well.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Tara Connell.
Good evening. I just want to preface first with whatever I have to say isn't against like an admin position or isn't against a teacher, because you're all greatly appreciated. It's just trying to figure out how to make things work and suggestions. And along the way of like where there's Facebook comments or social media comments, some of those things haven't been said tonight. And so it's to bring light to conversations that many of us have, but might not be comfortable to bring to a mic, recognizing that you don't give names or roles. You'll see where I'm going with this. So but the first thing is just to add to your comment about us not celebrating academics before I go into my notes. I think you're right. We don't celebrate honor roll even anymore. It's not out. Like we don't celebrate our kids. And we're saying tonight, student-centered, but why aren't we celebrating that about our kids? It's one thing that's a conversation among many parents is where is it? And not just going to the website, but putting it in the newspaper, or the kids getting an email of congratulations. Our kids are working hard. They're taking AP classes, college credits. 8th grade, they're working in honors classes. In kindergarten, 1st grade, they're working hard as well. Like, we need to celebrate their academics. So I just wanted to add it to that because I thought that was a great point. Just to add to some comments, some have already been said, but there are some questions, and some of mine are questions and not necessarily how to fix the problem. But to many of us, Goshen feels admin top heavy. And it's a comment that's made all along that we feel top heavy. And in a declining enrollment, why is an assistant principal needed at SAS? The math doesn't math to many of us. And not that you have to answer that question, but it's just something that a lot of us are thinking about. And sometimes it feels as though we move administration to different roles and then add more administration when those are some of our highest salaries in the district. So again, the math doesn't math on that. Are there other areas where cuts could be made? We cut custodial summer staff employment for students, but have we ever considered giving students certain jobs like scorekeeping at basketball games? From my understanding, scorekeepers make a lot of money. But can we make it more of a student position of scorekeeping or the technical jobs like Mr. Rediker's? Maybe Mr. Rediker, as a director of technology, could give this job of working at school boards to a student. If our students, do those extra roles also, the other question that parents have is when those roles are given to teachers, does that add to their retirement? So then doesn't that make their retirement top heavy, and aren't they adding to their retirement, which then makes us have to give more money to teachers in the end when we could save money and give that money to our students? If our students can be sports refs, firemen, handle money at stores, or start their own businesses, there are definitely jobs their kids could do within this district and a way to maybe cut money. The vote wasn't just about the superintendent raise, it's about the superintendent process. It used to be a district that involved the community in the process, and it feels as if it's been done behind closed doors all year long. And in all those processes you've mentioned tonight, you've said that we've asked administrators, but what has been asked to the teachers? What has been asked to the students? They're the ones living the Goshen Central School District every day. They're the ones that have the voice, that see everything that goes in day by day. Something near and dear to my heart, which I spoke to about 2 meetings ago, is the booster clubs and the parent process and the parent community. The interim superintendent implemented new guidelines for the district to oversee the 8th grade dance, junior prom, homecoming, and other school dances, yet simultaneously created some roadblocks for booster clubs that have historically provided free support and supplemental benefits to students. And at a time when the district is facing a budget deficit, energy should be directed toward identifying cost-saving solutions rather than implementing procedures that complicate volunteer efforts and added inefficiency. In addition, there was a note in the district policy manual at the end of section 500, code 52 that was added, which states, any event hosted by a district approved club in which a fee for attendance is charged that requires paid of services such as district employees and community members, the sponsor club must incur the costs. That happened, well, that part did not happen this year, but for the class of 2026, I'm the president of the Goshen Booster Club of the class of 2026. We were guaranteed all of the money that was profited from homecoming. It was $13,901, and that was sent over to our castle. This year, let me see where I was. There we go. This year, we have 175 registered seniors coming to our all-night party at the castle. We need that $13,901. And if any of it is cut, that will cut our all-night party. An event where students are encouraged to party all night long rather than engage in other unnecessary events. It's not, that cut isn't happening to our class this year, thank God, but it will happen to next year's class and all the other classes, which you all have students in. That's really gonna hurt them. This year's all-night party is costing us between $55,000 to $60,000. You can't cut from those funds. If you're saying right now how much student-centered you are and how much student-centered you are, that decision is not student-centered. Additionally, there's an increase in needs of special education. And I've been a firm believer of being proactive instead of reactive. It's why I work in early intervention and preschool. My comment isn't necessarily going to help with budget things as someone who works in EI and preschool, but I suggest that the district research why the increase is happening of special education needs and what can be done to properly address it instead of just adding extra aids and extra support. But it's kind of like what you were saying, what are we doing to address the problems or the issues? A few weeks ago when I was speaking, a senior spoke before me and rightfully mentioned that SAS needs BCBAs, that's board certified behavioral analysis or assistance. So do the extra aids and support generally address the needs and behaviors that are now seen in our children, or is there something that we should be looking as to why this increase in special education is happening? And although we are not required by state, we could be pioneers with screening kids as they enter into the UPK. There are kids that are going into UPK that are not identified who did not go through CPSE, which is the preschool special education program, or do not have a diagnosis, or the parents didn't know that there was something going on that needed to have services, and then they are going into a regular preschool classroom. And then they're identifying challenging needs for the Goshen, but then those kids are in those preschool classrooms and they're having identifying needs later on, rather than putting them in an early intervention and preschool process. And then the identification then gets passed into kindergarten, and then you're adding more and more and more. You could see these needs at your UPK. So by identifying the challenges and needs of our Goshen students earlier would then be our own form of early identification, which may offset the need for the needs for one-on-one aids and special education needs in the future. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Carrie Laviana.
Hi there. I'm just gonna apologize because this is gonna be all over. As you guys were talking, I was taking notes, so just bear with me. I just want to say, you guys talked about the 3.06% increase. Again, this is my viewpoint only. I didn't have a problem with that. I think my problem was how the money was allocated into different buckets. So, John, thank you for clarifying. I understood when you guys talked about that percent raise for the superintendent, it wasn't going to him at once, it was this range. So I appreciate you like elaborating that. I don't know if everybody actually understood that. But with that, I think we have to have like whoever gets hired for the superintendent, there needs to be some sort of measurable goals and accomplishments. I think that's what we're looking for to see, right? It's the most important job in the district. The success of the district kind of lies in their hands. So for us, it's, yes, we want the most qualified. We don't want somebody who's just gonna come in here and, you know, collect a paycheck. We want the best interest, somebody who's gonna fight for the programs, have the teachers' best interests, have the children's best interests, have the taxpayers' best interests at heart. I know last year we let, I think it was 25 aides go, and then Dr. Carter said we were able to hire 15 of them back. So clearly there was a need. So I guess I'm confused why we let them go and then realized we did in fact need them. So we rehired them back. I think we need to look at that. I think we need, I think the district needs aides. I think they need maybe a little bit more training. I think the teachers are overwhelmed sometimes in these classrooms with the, you know, the large classroom settings. So I want to see more for the teachers. I want to see more for the students, but I definitely want to see more for the teachers. I can say my kids have had amazing teachers. Some of them are here in this room and have helped my kids along in ways that I can't even explain. So I think it's important that we also recognize the teachers, right? Recognize the students' academics, we recognize students for sports, but I think we also need to recognize some of the teachers as well. Capital improvement. I don't want a building to not get fixed because it has a leaky roof. So I definitely think that should not be something in the budget we should postpone. The tennis courts, yes, they're a sore eye. But at the end of the day, the teachers and the kids' safety in the buildings, in this building, is a priority. Let's see what else. We talked about that enrollment was going down. So I understand, I think it was Shannon who said it, that needs, just because enrollment goes down doesn't mean needs go down. And I think we need to figure out what those needs are looking forward into the future and address them. I was actually reading something the other day, like Governor Hochul has proposed in 2028 that all UPK 4 will be universal, right? Everyone get in. I think right now it's a lottery. So that would be a line item in our budget. And then how are we allocating that? How are we paying for that? Are we keeping it in the building? Are we outsourcing it? Again, there's just a lot that I think we need to look at. And I think the budget that was presented, I think people just saw it as administrative and not down to, from the teacher, down to the student, down to what we can offer. Billy talked about adding programs. I just want to say the internship program is phenomenal. I think things like that need to be added, or I mean, that's there. I mean, maybe grow, but things like that need to be offered to students. We want to set Goshen apart. I love Goshen. I think it's a great school district, but I think we could be better, and I think we need to be leaders and act first so that people kind of look at us and be like, oh wow, like we want to follow what Goshen is doing. And right now, I don't see that, and that's my biggest concern. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Again, we really do appreciate everybody's comments, and in a meeting like this, it is hard to kind of do what John was saying and not just instantly respond. You know, the meetings aren't necessarily formatted that way. But, you know, I think that you made a lot of really good points, and we appreciate that. You know, please keep in mind, please send an email if you've spoken in public session, because there may be something that you shared and you'd like your question answered in a response. Send an email. We want to make sure everybody, you know, has, you know, answers to those things.
Our weekend's already booked, so.
Those are big slim things. All right, so on to our next item here. Back to any board member comments, agenda items, any further points of discussion?
Risk of breaking the rules.
Okay, great. So, you know, I just wanted to share really one thought. In closing, our goal tonight was stated clearly in the beginning. We do want to revise this budget to make everybody feel good about it, that it works. We don't want to flip it upside down and just have something that doesn't work. We feel like we can get there, and we implore you, the community, please go out and vote. No matter how you do it, please exercise your right to vote. Just get out there and do it. The voter turnout numbers were low. Please do that. Be mindful of misguiding information. Everybody has a right to have their voice, but misguiding information builds misguided perception. Please seek clarification. If something doesn't sound right to you, go to the source, write an email, ask about it. A lot of folks rely on their favorite social media platforms and get misguided information, which builds misguided perceptions. Please be cautious of that. We welcome everybody here to speak. Please ask the questions, get the information. If you feel like something's not adding up, we want to make sure you have that information. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to have different opinions. But please don't vote in spite. If you go out and vote in spite, you're only hurting one person, the students. I'm hoping, the best of our ability, we get something to deliver on Monday that we feel great about, that we feel the community can embrace. I don't want to get into talking about a contingency budget tonight, but if we had a delta of $100,000, which was a 0.1%, and we ended with a contingency, and we had to now cut instantly $1 million. That's another $900,000 that we've just stripped from our students. Not that our way has to be the best way. Please keep that stuff in mind. We're hoping to do the best we can to serve the whole community and deliver a passable budget on Monday. And again, I just want to thank everybody for coming, sharing, and listening at this workshop tonight. All right, we need a motion for executive session. Got John and Brett. Be resolved, the Board of Education will enter into executive session. We intend not to reconvene this meeting. Discussion related to the employment history of the big favor. Opposed? Everybody.